G'day legends, I hope that you're having a great day and a great start to the week. Now, today we're going to discuss some strikes in Russia as Ukraine has released a new teaser video for more strikes. And we know Ukraine has released some teasers in the past, such as, launching the counter offensive. Then we're going to have a look at the maps and we'll talk about the Ukrainian special forces being trained specifically to retake Crimea and a look over Zelenskyy's newest statement. But first, let's have a look at this newest teaser video released along with some of these drones. And this actually puts some more pieces of the puzzle back together for us. Now, there's a few versions of this. There's a longer and a shorter one, but I have the longer one here. And then we'll talk about some of the players in this. So here we have this teaser here. We have a child here, a Ukrainian kid, launches the paper plane of a family and then a Ukrainian flag. Then it turns into then a drone from here. You can see by this sort of evil smile mouth on the front, this is the same that we see on the front of the HIMARS systems as well in Ukraine. And as you can see where these are striking, so this is the internationally recognised border, of course, Crimea down here. This is like Kerch, and through here, this is where the international border is. So there are strikes within Ukrainian territory as well, and then strikes outside of Ukrainian territory. Of course, these ones penetrating deeper into Russia, and we'll talk about that and the capability in a second. So, of course, Engels Air Force Base over here. That is home to Russia's strategic bomber fleet, the nuclear-capable ones, although anything's nuclear-capable if you strap a bloody bomb to it. And then a strike, and this is Moscow here. Silhouette, Moscow. And this says the 24th of September, the red and black here, of course, being the national flag of Ukraine, or the battle flag, as people will say as well. So, that is then what we see, and that was then released by multiple sources. Now, we're going to go into this more, but I just want to say something because I think people misinterpreted something I may have said yesterday. It's probably just my poor wording about striking Russia in particular. Now, anyone who watches any of my content will know that I'm absolutely vehemently against targeting civilians. I'm very anti-war, but I understand why war has to happen in some cases. But I'm vehemently against targeting of civilians, regardless of their nationality, views, religion, and that it really saddens me that not all people share this same opinion. Now, my point was that the purpose of these strikes is that I believe it is strategically bringing the war home for Russia, that the average Russian civilian, the citizen in Moscow, has had very little effect from this war. Therefore, why should they really involve themselves too heavily in what's going on? Of course, that is not saying that then they should be striked. I'm absolutely against this. If your goal is to then persuade a population about war, you need to show them the war. You need to have it and that it is a risk to them or to where they live, not just in a faraway land. And then when that happens, that's when then your propaganda can come and influence and sway people the way that you want to really push them, for or against. But that said, strikes like this can absolutely backfire and add credibility to Russia's claims against Ukraine over the past years. And this is where the idea of false flags comes from. So there is a lot of risk involved in things like this. But it is no way different to how the West and all of us turn a blind eye to so much cruelty and around the world because it doesn't directly affect us or our everyday lives. So let's talk about when this was released. This was released, I think, about 12 or 14 hours ago, both from Sarah Ashton Cirillo here, who we'll talk about, as well as, where's this, from Anonymous on their Twitter. There's a very large Twitter, 1.7 million followers, and they put up the shorter version of this. So Sarah is, let's just put through of what the Washington Blade says. So Sarah is a journalist, was a journalist when she began to cover the armed force of Ukraine's Kharkiv Defense Force in the beginning of the war. She eventually has enlisted, and a commander from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry on Jan 31 facilitated her transfer to the 209th of the 113rd. So a transgender woman born in New York, working as a senior combat medic in the trench in Crimea, suffered injuries to her right hand and her face, and now is doing a lot of stuff online for the Ukrainian Defense Force in videos such as this, both on YouTube and online, and also shared then these videos. Actually, the first place that I then saw it, the war is coming to Russia, Moscow, you will never be safe. So who's actually behind this? Well, it's Serhiy Pritulia, this guy, so a volunteer public figure, Ukrainian volunteer, and the founder of this charity that supports the Ukrainian Defense Force. Very large again, 1.2 million followers. So this is where these beaver drones came out. Now, these drones are said to have a range of 1,000 kilometers, and we've actually spoken about these before as we've seen them in the skies above Russia, but didn't know what they were, because the best way to really identify what it is by these two small, like, winglet canard things at the front. And we didn't know what it was. We thought it looked like another type of Iranian drone, but this is sort of confirmed that this is what it is. These are being made from donations. Now, Ukrainian account has said the UAV costs approximately $108,000, about twice the price of a Iranian Shahed 136 drone, but has EW, electronic warfare protection, longer range, and a more powerful warhead. So let's have a look over some of what has been released. So this, of course, is the photo of then the beaver drone and some of these posts along with it. We have no idea what can fly to Moscow, but we assure you, you who donated for revenge are guaranteed not to be involved. There will be more. This is just a shot. You can always support the defense through his link here. So these are like crowd-funded weapons from this guy here. As well, Muscovites. Shudder from the sirens, go to bomb shelters. Watch as it flies in strategic objects. Do not sleep from the work of air defense. Go to funerals of loved ones, and at the same time, don't get tired of looking for an answer to the question, for what? And this links into what I was saying before, maybe the strategic reason for these. Now, a lot of people are pointing at a photograph of the motor that was found in the strike on Moscow yesterday and the motor on then the beaver drone. Now, of course, these aren't the greatest images in the world, but to my eye, this is not the same motor. This is a two-cylinder boxer here. And the shaft looks a lot shorter, and this, to my eye, doesn't look like a two-cylinder boxer, but I could absolutely be wrong. Although from the explosion we saw in Moscow, you would assume this has a larger warhead than what we saw there. And something I did miss yesterday, which I appreciate people bringing up, was that had a lot of like a fire in the explosion that hit Moscow, which seems like it may have had something to actually ignite and make it look bigger, make it look more movie-like, if that makes sense. You know, when you first see explosions in real life, like when you throw a grenade, say, and you've only ever seen a grenade in a movie, when you first throw one, you're like, what the fuck? It's just like a bang, and loud puff of dirt, no like fire and whatever. That doesn't exist in real like explosives. You see, like look at a JDAM hit. So but it could absolutely be something that you've put a bit of fuel or something in the warhead to make it bigger. So when it does trend online, it can actually make it look bigger than it is, if that makes sense. Someone pointed that out, and I thought that was a good point. I'm not saying that is exactly what happened, but it's a good point in that explosion, is something that I definitely missed myself. Now, we're going to have a look at the maps, as the maps are going to be a lot shorter today because there's really nothing going on. Even War Mapper said today there's been no real changes. Of course, we've got Ukraine, the capital of Kiev. We have the Black Sea, Sea of Azov, of course, the Kerch Strait, the Bosphorus here. The red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 14, Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. And just at the end, we'll talk about Belarus and Wagner group there as well. Now, the only change on the deep state map we have seen is up around the Svatov region here. We did see Russia make some dramatic ground, but then that's been slowly pushed back. So let's go back to where we saw the ground taken. if it'll load, ground taken, and then slowly push back. And then it has said that this Ukraine has stabilized an area in here, but that Russia has put in an amount of reserves as well. But that is really the only change we've seen there. Now, yesterday, one of the big things we did see was, if this will load, that Protini in here, there was an advancement there. Now, let's look at Surik maps around this region. Now, sadly, I don't have like a yesterday from here there, but this is confirming that Ukraine did make advances here, and he confirms that as well. Now, let's go to Robotini down here as well. We did see Ukraine have a major push, but no real change in here over the last day or two. And he does say that Russian reinforcements have managed to reinforce the line here, and this hasn't moved much. So this is showing very similar between the deep state and the Shuruk maps here, as well as, you know, where the Russian reinforcements are coming in to try and reinforce this. Because like we've said, once things start collapsing, it could go very quickly one way or then the other. So Wagner in Belarus, and I copped a lot of flack of this. People think I'm wrong, but it's great. I like legitimate discussion. I think we live in a world where just shut down of people is so bad. So I really like, even if you're like, Willie, you're an idiot because of this, I appreciate that. But if it's Willie, you're an idiot, well, give me a reason of why I'm an idiot, why I'm wrong. I really appreciate like constructive criticism and feedback. And even if you think that I'm completely wrong, great. At least we're thinking about it. So this was from the 30th from the UK MOD. Since mid-July 23. At least several thousand Wagner troops have likely established themselves at a military camp at Sel in Belarus. Imagery shows mid-July 23, hundreds of vehicles have arrived at the previously mostly empty facility. And these are these facilities that were handed over to Wagner Group after then the mutiny against Moscow. And that would have been the time, I think, to strike those drones in. Separate reports suggest most of the visible vehicles are trucks and minibuses with a few armoured combat vehicles. It remains unclear what has happened to the heavy equipment Wagner used in Ukraine. There is a realistic possibility that it was forced to return these to the Russian military. Now, there is multiple clips showing this heavy armoured equipment being handed back to the Russian military, as well as a number of Wagner soldiers have also seek contracts as well with the Russian military too. Wagner's ability to secure heavy equipment and enablers such as air transport will be key factors in its future combat effectiveness. Now, Wagner in Belarus, there's a lot of guys, so they're saying at least several thousand. So that's a hell of a lot of people of frontline combat troops. That is a lot. But from the images we've seen, the small videos, whatever we've seen coming out, is mostly in like a training role. And this is something that Russia, Belarus really lack, is training of just their regular forces. So what we're mostly seeing, and we do this too, like this is what my job was when I went to Afghan, was to train the Afghan National Army, or at least provide the protection for that training to then take place, if that makes sense. So that is most of what we've seen, is Wagner then training Belarus and training those then Belarusian soldiers. Now, where does that end up? Well, we don't know. Wagner doesn't have enough guys there to go through the Suwalki Gap. Belarus doesn't have the power to do that either. But could we see a frontline open? We are unsure, but that is where the training is happening, and we know that Russia was handed over a number of areas there as well, but the lack of armour, but it could just be a training for then the Belarusian soldiers to use armour from there. We know Russia and Belarus have a very, mutual relationship, or Russia is, sort of over Belarus going from there. So, as well, the UK Express, the news, has shared an article reporting on the United Kingdom's soldiers who are going to be training Ukrainian commandos for air, land and sea operations, like special operations. Now, this source claims the British troops are training an elite Ukrainian commando brigade to cripple Russian forces and recapture Crimea before Christmas. Now, someone did say I should get an ad blocker, and yeah, I'm a computer idiot, but this looks like my YouTube. Look at all these bloody ads popping up. Trying to make a bit of money from mainstream news before the papers go off the shelves. So the operation will involve strikes from air, land, and sea, with Ukrainian commandos using technology to undermine and paralyze Russian troops. Sorry, I just need to slow down for my voice. British troops are training elite commando brigade, as we spoke about, and more than 2,000 soldiers have arrived in a remote location in Dartmoor to take part in these exercises, and that these will be the tip of the spear of the invasion, while the other two mount concurrent attacks. So you need multiple things going on, a complex attack from there. As Ukrainian intelligence chief Kirill Budanov has said that they will enter Crimea soon, as we know, that came out on then the weekend. And this will be overseen by the Royal Marines from the 42nd Commando. Now, 42 Commando Marines, this is like their bread and butter. Somewhere like Crimea, this sort of operation, that is absolutely what the Royal Marine Commandos are there. And I absolutely would say that the British SBS, the Special Boat Service, most people know the SAS, the Special Air Service, and then there's the other Special Boat Service, will also be involved in some of this, as well as, the 42 Commando would be tight links there too, that they will then, carry out operations with new stock of long-range weapon systems. And like they're saying here, that this is purely to take Crimea. That placed on NATO tactics to help Ukrainian troops shape the battle space before striking the heart of the enemy. The sources said the operation to retake it will be one deploying multiple assaults on Russian forces. So you can't just have one and stop. It needs to keep going through, and breakthroughs need to come and support from there. It's great to land troops somewhere, but how does logistical support happen from there? How does more bullets, bombs, water, medevac, all of that then happen? We can train them in our tactics and show how to use equipment, but success will come from the Ukrainians' own ability to quickly adapt and overcome challenges. Mr. Giles from the Chatham House think tank has said this is unlikely to be achieved through a blitzkrieg strike unless Russian forces have completely collapsed. But if attacks on the Kerch Bridge continue and they interdict the railway line, and this coincides with the offensive that threatens other routes, eventually that must have an impact on how viable Russia's hold on Crimea is. So, of course, strikes with long-range artillery, people, partisans behind the line as well, and then covered with these strikes. But this is nothing new. We absolutely know that Ukrainian special forces have been training with special forces from all around the world. But that is no secret to bloody anyone who has their finger on the pulse here at all. Of course, it makes sense that the regular infantry will train with the regular infantry and the SF will train with the SF. It can't hurt. This is nothing new, but it sounds like the source that then the Express has is more but these 2,000 guys are specifically soldiers to storm and take. Then Crimea will at least come in and create a breakthrough, do what they can, and it's for a bigger thing to come in. 2,000 of the best soldiers are not going to just be able to go and hold. You need to break through and hold, seize and hold ground. That is what then that needs to happen. Medvedev as well has released this, of course. Medvedev, president while Putin was out of power. By repelling the collective enemy's counteroffensive, our armed forces are defending Russian citizens and our land. It is quite clear to all decent people. Besides that, they are preventing global conflict, which I would push against. The people really risking a global conflict was Russia's then invasion. Just imagine that NATO supported Ukro-Bandovsky, so he's saying Ukraine and Bandera offensive turned out successful. So saying if it does come out successful and they took away part of our land, so of course he sees that is part of their land. Of course, things like Crimea, places that annex, Donetsk, Luhansk, things like this. We would have to follow the president's decree. This is the decree in 2020, the use of a nuclear weapon. And we know Medvedev, Putin as well, love throwing around the nuclear bomb thing. There would be simply no way out. That's why enemies must worship our warriors. They're keeping a global nuclear fire from flaring up. If a nuclear war happens, it's because someone's fired one. Anyway, congratulations on Russian Navy Day, which is today. P.S. The unmanned underwater vehicle Poseidon sends its greetings and recommends the enemies of our country to pray for all the Russian Marines' health. Now, a couple of things in this. That a nuclear war is, I believe, very unlikely, but the Russian Federation's decrees do say that if the Russian Federation is threatened, that nuclear strikes, the first strike, can take place. Now, what would happen following that, I don't know. I more sit on the side that I don't think we would see a counter-strike because next thing we're ending the world, but I really don't know. The last thing we want to see is nuclear weapons being fired. And people who, nuclear weapons are sort of trendy at the moment, it's half the reason this is in here, is because of Oppenheimer. If you look at the bomb they dropped on Nagasaki, Hiroshima, that these weapons that we know Russia has, we know America has, we know Britain have, we know France have, whatever, are many thousands times more powerful than that bomb. Now, of course, that doesn't mean it's many thousands bigger bomb, of course, with like the law of diminishing returns from that, but still would be a big change from this and would, as he says, that they're preventing the global conflict, that would then start a global conflict from there. Now, this Poseidon, this is a very interesting weapon system, and we don't have 100% confirmation that it actually exists. Now, Poseidon is basically an underwater drone. I wouldn't really call it a torpedo, so it's a nuclear-powered underwater drone that can apparently basically go indefinitely, because it's nuclear powered, can run for a bloody long time, tens of thousands of kilometres, or 10,000 kilometres under the water, carrying a massive nuclear warhead, and when it explodes underwater basically creates, as they claim, 1,000-foot radioactive tsunami to then flood anywhere then on the water. And so that is the claim. And Poseidon, if you look at the theory, is an incredibly scary weapons, but all these weapons are scary, but that's what these weapons are there for. These weapons are to prevent things like this. Nuclear weapons are the biggest preventative measure ever, and many will claim that nuclear weapons have saved far, far more lives. So far, nuclear weapons have saved far more lives than they have taken. If a landing onto mainland Japan was to happen, the amount of death just overall would be it'd be many times more will happen in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. But nuclear weapons are the biggest muscle flex, and it is something everyone is scared of and is really a doomsday thing. But I hope that we don't see it, and I don't think that we will see them actually involved. Now, this has come out from President Zelenskyy as well here in this. She does say some interesting things and some little bits and pieces then we will talk about. So at 40 seconds in, he talks about then the energy sector and the preparations for war, and claims that Russia has gone bankrupt on the battlefield.
Спеціальна воєнна операція, яку російське керівництво розраховувало на тиждень-два. Україна стає міцніше. Поступово війна повертається на територію Росії.
So here he says gradually the war is returning to the territory of Russia. This is where people say that this links in, of course, with the teaser we watched at the start, that the war is returning. So these strikes then coming more into Russia from there, and that it is a fair process from there. So symbolic centers, military bases, inevitable, natural and fair process.
Справедливий процес. Але маємо бути свідомі того, що як і минулого року, так і цієї зими російські терористи ще можуть бити по нашій енергетиці, по критичних об'єктах. Сьогодні ми обговорили із громадами.
So he speaks about that Russia into wintertime over Christmas will then strike again these critical infrastructure facilities. Now, are these facilities a military target? Power, things like that, they are a military target, but it, of course, then affects many, many millions of civilians. But is it a military target? Well, if we were taking a country, we would target that as well. It doesn't mean that I'm saying we should. No, absolutely bloody not. Put your head on. But, if you're military planning, you'd go, yeah, well, we need to take that out because that runs the power for this as well. But one interesting thing in this that people have pointed out, and I thought to myself, is that this war, he's preparing for saying that the war is not going to be over by the end of the year, like many have said that, it'll be cleared by the end of summertime, whatever, into the start of winter, that he's preparing you for that it's not going to be ended by then. He's saying that the people in those local oblasts need to be preparing now for what could happen in winter, and also does call out some stuff here as well. There will be more budget released as well, but the people see who's paving the streets instead of helping soldiers, who is spending money on bot farms instead. So calling out how some of this money is being spent not for then the front line. But bot farms, at the end of the day, the war online is incredibly important for Ukraine. Like we spoke about with the missiles, Ukraine needs to stay in the media. It needs to stay relevant. Things like this, it needs to stay at the forefront so the support keeps up. So people keep supporting, keep thinking, oh my God, that's still going on, that support from there. So bot farms, things like that, we know that both Ukraine and Russia absolutely take advantage of those. Ukraine, in my opinion, does a far better job with like the astroturfing stuff too. But it is a big thing, and that is absolutely part of the war. And as war evolves, that will become more and more and more part of war and online, especially as AI becomes unrecognisably different from you just see me sitting here. Might give my voice a bloody break.
Дронів для фронту, хто вкладається в наближені фірми, а не в реконструкцію лікарень та реабілітацію воїнів. Пріоритет номер один – це оборона.
And the number one priority is defence, protection of state and the people. And then Zelenskyy talks about the peace formula given to NATO, the eventual joining of NATO, and both how they need to all strive towards making the ways into NATO and both the EU, that people can't go against that. So here we go, with the European Union being passed, and if someone is not ready to work positively in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, he or she must understand that a negative impact this will have on them in their communities. They should feel the appropriate attitudes towards themselves. Either they are for Ukraine or they will have a hard time in Ukraine, although people should be able to have a separate idea if for leaders, especially democratically elected leaders at any state of the government, of course, and of course the front line. So a good, powerful day at the front line. Then he thanks a lot of the people fighting as well, individual units, and where he has been in Ivano-Frankivsk with doctors and nurses too. So what do you think of all of that? Legends, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to support me, links down below, but never feel obliged. I really appreciate being with you. We'll take it. Okay, goodbye. Thank you.